I'm making a video in spite of my day. I've got a fly problem at my apartment, which is frankly clean. It's spotless. Okay, I had to kill him. Sorry, any fly lovers out there. I have an unreasonable standard for cleanliness in my apartment. 1 week a year, I have a bunch of friends in town for a music festival, and I really have to just let myself go that entire week. I just swallow my neuroses whole, and we eat a bunch of tacos, and I shit them out a week later. But I don't get what the fuck this fly problem is. It's been driving me crazy. And then I hook everything up today, and I realized that my Apogee Duet, a critically acclaimed audio interface, is unusable. It sounds like a dial-up modem. It's not the 50 hertz hum, it's not 60 hertz hum. I don't know whether the breakout cable, which is extremely flimsy and cheap, is susceptible to interference, or if it's the unit itself. It's not any other piece of gear. I have figured that out. And after engaging in a bit of confirmation bias by searching Apogee Duet hum problems on Google, I found dozens of other users who are experiencing the same damn problem. So the Duet is going away. I'm getting a Zoom H6 recorder, which will enable me to do voiceovers and record all of my music at the same time on separate tracks. It's just more money gone. Thought I was done purchasing gear, but yeah. So I'm spending more money, and I'm doing it all for this. To look like an idiot on the internet. So yeah, please enjoy. Today is part 2 of my series on my first DAWLESS studio. We're going to go over drums. I'm using the Arturia DrumBrute. We're going to look at each element in the drum kit, listen to each sound individually, see how I'm processing them, and then do a little bit of jamming. So keep calm, spend money, kill flies, let's go. Am I extreme enough, GoPro? Woo! Let's get extreme. Extreme! Alright, let's get started. I'm using the Octatrack to send MIDI transport and MIDI clock to the DrumBrute. All my drum sounds are being sequenced within the DrumBrute. It's got a 64-step sequencer. The DrumBrute sounds go out of the mix output, but the DrumBrute also has individual outs for each sound. So if I insert a cable into the individual out, it's going to remove that sound from the mix output. My drum sounds are going out of the DrumBrute into this 8-channel mixer to submix my drums. Let's look at an example of gain staging using channel 1 on my mixer, which corresponds to kick 1 on my DrumBrute. I'll press play on the Octatrack, and the sequencer on the DrumBrute begins running. I'll engage pre-fader solo on channel 1 of my mixer, and the VU meters light up indicating that the kick signal is coming through on channel 1. We can see the sound, but we can't hear it. That's because pre-fader solo sends the sound through the headphones and the control room out, neither of which are connected to anything. Now, since I know my equipment, I don't need to hear the sound when I'm setting my levels. For instance, with this mixer, I know that the ideal signal is going to have peaks that meet but don't exceed the first set of yellow lights. You can see that this signal is slightly hot because it's hitting the second set of yellow lights. So, here's the lesson in gain staging. Where do I turn it down? On my mixer or on my source? In this case, the DrumBrute. Well, there's really just one rule to gain staging, And as long as you're following this rule, you're going to be doing it to the best of your abilities. The rule is, at each stage in your signal path, you want the sound to be as strong as it can be without distorting. So here's stage 1, the DrumBrute. I know that this unit doesn't self-distort, and it's very rare that you will have a synth that self-distorts. Self-distorts meaning if I turn up the volume, the sound is beginning to distort within the unit. Provided your unit doesn't self-distort, you want to turn the volume in the unit as loud as it will go. And then if that's too loud for the inputs at the next stage, you can adjust accordingly. In this instance, I'm going to use the trim pot to turn down the volume a little bit, and now you can see my volume is at an ideal level where it's meeting but not exceeding the first set of yellow lights. I'm going to do a separate video that does a more in-depth look at gain staging, but that's not the goal of this video. Yes, that rule is easy to understand, but I'm always asking, what happens if I break the rules? But rather than use the jargon of music, I'll use a more relatable example. Of course, if you don't know what those words mean, look them up. So, I've gone ahead and set the levels for each channel. Let's see how I'm processing the signals from the DrumBrute. We'll start with channel 1, which is kick 1 on the DrumBrute. You can hear this is a 909 kick emulation. It's completely dry right now. Something I would do when I was in the box is split a kick signal. That's sometimes referred to as molting a signal. I'd split the same kick 2 or even 3 times. I'd EQ 1 to be only the low end of the kick, 1 to be the mids, 1 the highs. In this instance, I've split the kick in 2 by using an insert which goes to the JDX direct drive. The tip or send is going into the direct drive. The return is the through on the direct drive. Through meaning it's not going to any of the circuitry of the amp simulator. It's going in, and the same signal that goes in goes through. So really, I'm just returning the same signal that I sent, which is why you're hearing the dry signal. The second copy of the signal is going out, meaning it's using the circuitry of the amp simulator. The amp simulator is exactly what it sounds like. It simulates 3 classic amplifiers, and for each amp setting, you can have 2 microphone settings. One which is bright, meaning a more centered microphone placement, and one which is normal, slightly duller, slightly less high end, and the mic placement would be a bit off center. For this kick, I'm using the normal setting, the slightly duller of the 2. I'll turn down the dry signal, which is channel 1, and turn up the signal that's going through the direct drive. You can hear it's got a bit of dirt to it. It's sounding a little nastier in the mid-range, slightly distorting. To me, I like that with my kicks. The phaser tool is very important to me. Let's bring channel 1 up. Whenever you're splitting a signal, particularly in instances where one signal is dry and the other is being amplified, or at least simulated to be amplified, you're going to have phasing issues. Phasing is most pronounced in the low end of the sound, so I've turned down the highs and the mids for my 2 kick channels so that we can hear this a little better. You might not be able to tell, but these signals are not in phase. When I engage the phaser, listen to what happens to the low end. Without, listen to the low end. It almost disappears entirely. That's why I use the phaser. Let's listen to my snare signal. I really like the snare in the DrumBrute. It's snappy, it's got a nice decay to it. But to make things a little more interesting, I'm sending the snare through the excellent Red Panda particle pedal. Let's listen. You can see the red LEDs lighting up, indicating that the pedal is distorting slightly. That's because it's a guitar pedal. It's expecting a guitar or a bass, an instrument level signal to come into it. I'm sending in something much hotter, a synthesizer, which on average are about 20 decibels hotter than an instrument level signal. But I still choose to use guitar pedals with synths because they sound amazing. They're a lot cheaper than outboard gear. They're very easy to use. It's usually knob per function. There's no menu diving. Mike Will made it sort of change the landscape of rap when he decided to use an Ibanez guitar distortion pedal on an 808 kick drum. The pros are using it, so why wouldn't you? That's my snare. Channels 3 and 4, I believe this is my mix output. Yes. Everything that's not going through an individual out on the DrumBrute is going out of the mix output, which in this case is just these three sounds. For me, the hat sounds coming out of the DrumBrute are interesting enough to where they really don't need any processing. You can hear that by turning the decay, I can get some really interesting dynamic hat sounds going. So I've just left those as they are. They're dry. Channel 5 is my clap. I've read a lot of complaints online about the DrumBrute clap, how it's weak and thin. Okay, a lot of single clap samples are weak and thin. You have to layer sounds. You have to thicken them using effects. How many times in a recording are you going to hear a single clap sound that hasn't been processed or layered in any way? It's an absurd and uninformed critique. For me, I like to thicken things up with a very short delay. You can hear immediately the sound becomes more interesting. And by messing with delay times, I can get some really cool dubbed out clap sounds. Okay, we've already gone over 7. That's the split signal from the kick. So, now that we've listened to each sound and how I'm processing it, let's do some jamming. That's the fun part, right?